Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, Demi Lovato gave like one of those, apologies to the frozen yogurt place, but it's not a real apology, right? It's more about, I'll go through this, I'll play some of it, but I think it's a good opportunity. I haven't talked about this in the past for a variety of reasons, but it's a good opportunity to understand the victim stance and victim consciousness. And they're all pervading now. It's gotten so bad. This is something that is dominating our society. Everybody wants to be seen as a victim, right? Every demographic, every person is claiming to be a victim in some way or another. Not everybody, but, everything that you see out there, every person who's, complaining about their group or them specifically being mistreated wants to be categorized as being victimized. And if you're a person who believes in God, if you're a person who believes that there's a plan, I've talked about this in the past, that if you believe in God, then you believe that there's a plan, right? That it isn't random, it isn't chaos here. That the belief in God is the belief that there is a consciousness behind all of creation, that it isn't random, that there is some being responsible, some, intellect, some, heart, some intention behind all of the universe, all of creation, and everything that's happening to you and everything that's in the world. There's a reason for it. There's a purpose, that this isn't just, random. It's just not chaotic, right? It's chaos. And you have people who don't believe in God, who believe in science, and they believe that everything is chaotic. I've been talking about this in recent videos. But if you believe in either of these two things, which is really, you have to believe one or the other, or maybe some days you vacillate, or some days you think it's a plan, and some day you think it's chaos. But either way, whatever you believe in, there is no such thing as a victim, right? And I'm going to explain this because if you believe there's a God, if you believe that there's a plan, and you believe that there is a reason behind everything, then whatever happens to you comes from God. So either God gets it wrong, and your soul, and this is, I've talked about some scars before. People don't understand this. Of course, people aren't willing to, be open to the idea of past lives. But if when your soul was somewhere before you were here. You understand this? That your soul is now in your body, but it also exists in an etheric realm, etheric place, right? And your soul was, somewhere else before this life, your life right now. And your soul is going to go somewhere else after this life. And so how many people do you think that they get a passing grade at being a human being, right? Like right now, if you think about all the people and all the, people that are out in the public, how many of them have succeeded in their human life, right? And I don't mean being famous or rich or any of these things. I mean about being a good, godly person, that they, did what they were supposed to do here, and they can move on to the next, level or whatever it is, right? And so very few people, like, I know you've been promised stuff by your religion, and you think, oh, they're guaranteeing me that I'm going to go to heaven or whatever it is. But if you just looked at people's merit, their actions, very few people have been successful in graduating from the human experience. I mean, you see it all the time. There's a specific criteria on the spiritual level. This is covered quite extensively in the heartfulness system. There's a certain level of, getting rid of your samskaras, your samskaric load, a certain level of spiritual approach in terms of, moving closer to God that you have to achieve before you can be liberated from your earthly bondage and move on to another realm of existence. But anyways, getting back to the central point of this video, that in all of this, there is a plan. There's a continuation of where you were before. So if you, did things that you need to atone for in a previous existence, then, you're not certainly a victim, right? That there is a continuation of past behaviors, and I'll explain some scars again later on in this video. But either way, that if you believe in God, then there isn't any victims because there's a plan behind everything that happens. There, of course, is freedom of choice and things like this. But it's my belief from the heartfulness system and things I've experienced myself that to experience something in your material life, it has to exist in your internal world, right? I've talked about this. If you're going to be angry at people, there has to be anger in you. If you're going to hate people, there has to be hate in you, right? And so in the heartfulness system, your external world is reflecting back to you what is inside of you to show you what you need to get rid of, what you have to clean out, what you have to evolve past to get closer to God. Your external world is a mirror of what's inside of you. And so this is, pretty consistent with anybody in any sphere or any activity that believes in God. If they really thought about it, this makes sense, right? That, to experience things, there has to be something in your internal world which is manifesting these things in your external world. And so there's no victims, right? Whatever you've experienced, there's a reason for it. And usually it has to do with something you were involved in a previous existence that's unresolved, and you're just re-experiencing something that you failed at in a previous existence that you've, brought with you from your past life. And so that's people who believe in God. And the people who believe in chaos believe in, random, it's all random. It's, chance. There's no consciousness overseeing everything. Well, then how can you be a victim? When you live in chaos, anything goes, right? It's a free-for-all. And so if you're victimized by, random events, by chaotic events, you're not really victimized because this is, the wheel's spinning, and any day you can experience anything because there's no order, right? It's just chaos. And so there's no reason to complain. There's no reason to feel sorry for yourself because your belief is that you live in chaos and you're getting a good dose of chaos. And sometimes that dose of chaos is something that's horrible to experience, right? And I'm not minimizing how difficult it is to experience things and traumatic. I mean, trauma is there. Trauma is a real thing. Trauma is a reaction to, horrible behavior and horrible circumstances and shocking things that, shock your system. Like people go through real, difficult things, which I'll get into in a moment. I mean, that's real. I'm not minimizing how bad life can suck on planet Earth. I know, right? But I just want to give an introduction to the interview and then give you solutions, give you a way that you can cope, give you a way that can help you through all of these issues. So the first thing I want to talk about in this introduction is that when I was in graduate school, I was getting a master's degree in counseling. It was a sort of I don't want to say a new agey school, but, a progressive school in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it was a good education in the sense that they presented all these various psychological models. So people think they go to therapy and think that all therapists are the same and have the same point of view. But there's all these different models of psychological behavior, and they view human beings different. They view trauma differently. They view how you cope with it differently. They view how healing happens differently. And so that'll affect you based in the model. Like people just go to therapy and they don't even understand the point of view of the therapist, right? What is the counselor, how do they approach their, helping a person solve their psychological issues? And one of the models, and I can't remember which one, it's probably not all that important, but it was about group therapy. And this guy, the father of this particular psychological model, stressed that when you started like group therapy with, say, a family, the first thing you did was identify the health of the family, because you can easily get lost in the people that are the most unhealthy because they dominate, right? In any family circumstance, let's say you have a dad who's an alcoholic and you have a couple of kids who are acting out because of their dad being an alcoholic and they're in trouble and, they're suspended from school, have trouble with the law. And then you have maybe the mom, she's, maybe an enabler, but she's, at least somewhat healthy. And then you might have one or two kids who are quiet and don't say anything and don't, they just, they don't complain or rock the boat. They just suck up their feelings, right? They don't, say anything, and they're just the strong ones that are there, always getting their siblings out of trouble, helping them out, bailing them out one way or another, doing that extra work and chores, helping calm down the situation, right? Because they realized that if they went off and if they were a troublemaker, it would send the family over the cliff, right? So you have in every group circumstance, every situation, you have somebody who's the health, and those people are usually nobody notice, right? They're taken for granted, and they just keep on overcompensating for everybody else, the chaos that's going on in the family. And so this guy who created this group therapy model said, you have to identify the health and support the health because that person's probably completely depleted. And, without them, you're never going to be able to help, the whole family get as a whole, right? But what most psychological models and what society does is they focus on the people who are acting out. You see this in every classroom around the country. There'll be kids with ADHD and kids with, various difficulties, kids who are just maybe not as smart and, struggle. And those kids dominate. Like they're the ones that are getting all the attention from the teacher. The teachers spends, 40% of their time dealing with, one or two kids, and the other 20 to 30 kids are, sort of neglected. They just are supposed to get it together and cope and all these things, right? They're supposed to figure it out for themselves because, these kids who are messed up get all the attention, right? It's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I don't like the prodigal son teaching, right? That's, I don't believe in that. Like people think, all right, there's one, the prodigal son from the Bible. There's one son who leaves, ditches the family and then comes back and the father has a huge feast. And the other kids are like, what WTF, right? We've been here the whole time. What are you doing? And he's like, well, no, you gotta bring the ones back in. Well, no, I don't believe in that. Like why reward people for sucking? And this is our society right now, is that you have healthy people who don't complain, people that don't consider themselves a victim, but they're always being put upon. They're always having to compensate for all these divas, all these victim consciousness people out there, all whining that they're right, they're offended about this, they're offended about this, right? This idea of like these Karens or whatever it is. But, it's much more than that. Like across society, everybody claiming that they're being, victimized in some way and their group is screwed over and everybody's, then you have these people who just punch the clock every day and hold society together. They don't complain. They don't, for the most part, they just do their work and nobody notices them. And I need to say something here about that because you have diva personalities, big personalities, but then you have the just salt of the earth people that are the ones that hold your society together, your giant American family together or world family together, right? You have these people who are constantly sacrificing their needs for these broken people who can't, do it for themselves, right? Who can't survive on their own. And they often get attacked. They often get, blamed by the people that they are carrying on their back through life. There's a lot of good people out there that are carrying other people through life. They're carrying other sucky people through life. And their energy's getting drained and their dreams and aspirations are being not realized in things because they are just, burdened with other people who just suck. Maybe multiple people. Like you now have maybe, one kind of good functioning person carrying 4 people, or more, whatever it is, right? I mean, it's becoming like that. And the society's rewarding people. The media and social media is rewarding people for claiming to be victims and, patting them on the back and, all these things. Saying, no, you're right, all these ways that they're creating this problem where people who are actually, doing good work and are out there getting it done with nobody noticing. I mean, people don't appreciate the people they're carrying on their backs don't appreciate it, and like I said, often attack them, right? And so this is where our society's upside down, and the health of humanity eventually has to be supported. You can't just be supporting the people who are broken and then neglecting and blaming the people and asking for more. Because if one person's broken, that means that somebody else or multiple people have to compensate. This is all these Hollywood divas. Demi Lovato is a good example of this, who have a team of people around them that has to compensate, right? They're getting paid or, whatever they get out of the, arrangement. I mean, there might be something there, but the family members that, it's different. And they have to surround themselves, these Hollywood divas, these political, politicians and whatever it is, wealthy people have to surround themselves with a huge support system of people who don't get any glory, who don't get any attention, right? Who often being, neglected and these things, who have to carry these broken people and prop them up because they can't function for themselves. And, when you celebrate the broken, your society is going to crumble because the people who are, at some point, the other people are going to break, right? You're going to have everybody broken because the health of society is going to break under the weight of, these victim consciousness people, people who are, and I'll give you what a solution to this in your own life, what people, it's a different way of looking at things. And it stems from, the gratitude principle, which I talk about so much. So I'll come back to that in just a bit. So the next part is called the trauma outcome process. And I learned this when I worked with, sex offenders, kids who were acting out sexually who had been abused. And what you have is, and this is very simple and should, make sense to most people. And it's, you experience trauma. Somebody experiences trauma, and I'll get into what that is, because it's not what people think it is. And then after they experience trauma, there's everyday trigger events that trigger the trauma, like what they call trauma echoes, right? Trauma echoes, it's when a person doesn't deal with the trauma. The heartfulness system is wonderful at taking the bite out of trauma, getting rid of trauma echoes, turning trauma into just memories. Because trauma and a traumatic response and PTSD are real things. And so then you get into where there's choices and there's things that you can do. You can inflict the pain on others. You can inflict the pain on yourself, or natural and healthy coping where you accept the pain, right? And that's the only thing that works. And then there's self-acceptance, but I would call that gratitude. I have a different way of viewing it. But in terms of, this model of understanding trauma, which is, very important, is that it's like a poison that's been put in your system, like a virus that's been put in your system. Like you can get what I call like getting a whammy, where somebody has, negative energy, right? They're just, filled with negative energy. They have anger and hate and, and something's triggered them in their system. I mean, this happens, everybody gets into these states, right? Where you just feel miserable and you're dwelling on how bad you have it. You're dwelling on your own victim consciousness. Everybody goes through this at one time in their life. And you're, how unfair everything is, and your mind is just, completely poisoned. And then you just unload it on somebody, right? You go to them and you unload this negative energy. And they might be happy, they're having a good day, and then all of a sudden they absorb this energy, right? And they're like, now they have it in their system. There's a great cartoon that I have where you have like this boss and he yells at his employee, and the employee goes home and yells at his wife, and the wife goes and yells at the kid, and the kid goes and yells at the cat, right? So it's a good illustration of this. And it's how this, negative energy, this whammy, right, is, this virus, you can call it abuse, you can call it any number of things. I mean, it's going to come in different forms, trauma is dealt with. And, people would think, well, if you choose the lesser of two evils, which is, inflict pain on yourself instead of inflict pain on others, you're still going to inflict pain on others. If you self-abuse, if you're self-abusive or you get suicidal or any of these things, you're still going to inflict pain, and this energy is going to be passed from you to your loved ones and your support system. And certainly if you take this, victim stance, there's another wonderful, quote here. The victim stance is a powerful one. The victim is always morally right, neither responsible nor accountable, and forever entitled to sympathy. So if you have the abuse program inside of you, where you have been, traumatized, abused, whatever it might be, and that can take, various forms, where there is, you've internalized this person, the abuser, the tormentor, and it's now inside your system. Like you've had, some sort of interaction where somebody has abused you, mistreated you in some way that seems completely unfair and evil and mean. But now that person, that essence lives inside of you because it's, you've absorbed it into your internal world, and it was already there because you brought it in. It was there in seed form, in the form of some scars, right? Impressions from previous existences that you'd experienced something like this before, or it's something your soul wanted you to experience in this life, whatever it was. You came down with that inside of you because you wouldn't be able to experience it otherwise. And so now that's been activated inside of you. This type of, negative, abusive, angry, hateful energy, this way of being. And you have to cope with it and transform this energy. Like I wrote a whole workbook about this, transforming abuse. You have to change this energy, or you're gonna inflict this on other people. So you either figure out a way to deal with this energy that's inside of you, thinking about it as a computer virus or, something that's, so poison or venom, like this venom is inside of you, and the venom is going to come out on other people. This is a big problem for people in the truth community that look at the world crumbling around us, and you'll get mad at, Biden or the left or whatever it is, right? The deep state, and you'll be completely riled up about, all the things that you're hearing and all the, ways that you're interpreting reality, and you'll get angry and you'll be triggered. And then you talk to your loved ones about it, and like this negative energy that's inside of you, you'll feel hate, you'll feel anger, and you'll dump it on other people. You might, you'd be more volatile, you might yell more at people, you might, or just talk to them like rants, like just ranting to your loved ones who then, you turn off to these narratives because they're getting a big dose of negative, hateful energy that's coming from you that you feel towards the establishment, whatever it is. I mean, you see this all the time. People watching videos, or reading articles or whatever it is, talking with people, comments about what's going on in the world, the collapse of our system. And it's pulling out of you things inside of you, your hatred, whatever hatred you have inside of you. I've talked about this in the past. If you hate somebody, that's your hate. You have to have hate inside your system to hate people. That person might suck. That person might deserve to be hated. They might be behaving in ways that would create other people to hate them. But if you don't have hate inside of you, you can't hate. Like, no matter how bad the other person is, there's nothing inside of you to hate other people. There's no anger, there's no fear, there's no hate, right? So you see other people sucking, and you have no internal reaction to it. Like, you just recognize that they're sucking, even if they're doing it to you. You're not, triggered by it at all because you have a pure system, free, devoid of all these negative type of qualities, negative type of emotions and conditions. That's what saints are. That's what higher developed spiritual beings have achieved, where there's nothing in their system to, get triggered by the deplorable behavior of other people. And then you're like a mirror where the person, dumps their anger and tries to take a psychic dump on you, right? One of my former roommates, I lived in a shared house, and he went back to visit his family. And I said, yeah, how was your trip? He said, well, it's not so great. My brother, wanted to talk to me, and, these are like adults, in their 20s. And he basically blamed me for everything that was wrong in his life because of my housemate's behavior when he was like a teenager. I guess he was kind of a screw up, in trouble a lot. But he said, yeah, he just took a psychic dump on me, just blaming me for, everything wrong with his life, right? And so, this is what people do to each other. But if you have nothing inside of you to, grab hold of these things, then it just passes right through you. It goes, back to God, and then it reflects back at the person, right? It mirrored back at the person. And so, if you have anger and negativity and hate in your system, and you're thinking you're justified and self-righteous because you're a truther and you're getting to the bottom of things, and you get to just, vent at all kinds of people, especially your loved ones, and they all hate you because, you suck, you're horrible to be around. And so this is what I'm talking about, because if you're going to be a truther, you have to cope with what you're seeing out there. And you have to understand that there's a plan, that this isn't happening randomly. Our system is collapsing for a reason, and a lot of negative things are being pulled to the surface, and you have to do your best not allow those things to gain root in your system. I've talked about this story in the past. In the Heartfulness tradition, the second master, Babaji, was training his successor, Master Charji, who was, he said, like, there's this guy at work, I just hate him. And Babaji said, well, you got to throw that out of your system, especially at your level of spiritual development, because when you have a clean and pure system and there's a vacuum there, you have this, like, the people who evolve to higher levels of spirituality create this vacuum where they're just, absorbing God in a deep way, right? God is being sucked into their internal world because of this powerful vacuum, this, the pain of love, right? The lover craving the beloved, where, when you love somebody at such an intense level that you pull that person to you, you pull them, your love pulls you, creates a vacuum. And so if you introduce something like hate or anger into that process, it'll just expand and grow and metastasize like, a cancerous growth. And so he said, you got to throw this hate out of your system, because it's, your hate, you're not, whatever the person's doing to you at work, it's inside of you. The hate's inside of you. And then there was this great quote from Master Charji, who said, whenever you hate something, look into yourself and try to find it and remove it from within. Then you will not hate anything anymore. When you are afraid of something, look inside yourself, remove it from your inside, and you will not be afraid of anything in this universe after that. So again, I want to, talk about this as a solution, because if you have this stuff inside of you, you can transform it, you can, clean it out, get rid of it, and not pass it on to other people. I mean, ideally, what we want to do is stop passing on this negativity, this trauma, this anger, this, these horrible things to other people. Take responsibility for what's inside of us, and not, transfer it and contaminate the rest of the world with this poison, with this venom. And that's what victim consciousness does. People who are victims, have this victim stance and victim consciousness, think they have every right to drop this negative energy on other people. I've been through this myself, and it's, a horrible thing, right? To live with people who do this, and how it affects the environment, how it affects the other people involved. And the victim, because of their, drama, like you see with Demi Lovato, and their, demands of, and they're being offended and all these things, are the ones who get the attention. People neglect to see the people who are behind and supporting these people, right, and carrying them through life, like I said earlier. And so this is what this video is about, because you never hear about that. You never hear about the people that have to, endure the effects of people. There's going to be rage, and people are going to protest and riot when things don't go their way or whatever it might be. And then there's other people that have to absorb and clean up the mess, right? People are going to have fits and tantrums and things like this, and that's what everyone's going to focus on, right? So if there's like, an incident out there, and somebody is going off and flipping out and, destroying property or attacking other people, that's what people are going to watch. Like, that's what people want to see, the drama. Wow, look at that, right? But no one wants to watch people clean up the mess. No one wants to, and that takes a lot longer to do. And there are people out there every day cleaning up the mess of other people, and these other people are being celebrated now. The broken, right, are being celebrated, and they are just, making more and more of a mess of this world, right? And the people who are cleaning up the mess are, neglected, not thought of, right? And those are the people who are the true heroes. And so let's get into this thing with Demi Lovato, and I'll come back with, more interpretation and solutions for this stuff. So to start with, I made a video yesterday about Demi Lovato, and she went into a froyo place. I guess she has a big fan of frozen yogurt, and she has an eating disorder she is recovering from, and she went to get this frozen yogurt from this place. And, you probably heard my other video or know about the story, and she saw diet items, sugar-free cookies, and things like this. And so she went off on Instagram saying that they were diet vultures, and they were capitalizing on people's eating disorders, and that she was tempted by these, cookies and, stuff that she would have eaten in the past, and how hard it is for people who have eating disorders to see sugar-free cookies, right? And she went off on them, and they responded saying they make stuff for vegans and gluten-free stuff, and, that this is just, other people have needs, right? Or desires, and they have to, cater to their customer base. And then she pointed out this guilt-free advertising stuff. Of course, she has millions of followers on Instagram, so, this privately owned yogurt company, yogurt shop, frozen yogurt shop, is, being targeted. And again, could be something she worked out with them for promotion. Who knows, right? With these, celebrity endorsements or whatever it is. But in terms of it ending, she realized that she overreacted. So she gives this sort of pseudo apology.
So I have kind of gotten in the middle of something with this yogurt shop called The Big Chill in Century City.
See, that's not true. This is victim stance language. She got in the middle of something. You didn't get in the middle of something. You caused something. You went to a yogurt shop and you had an experience where you were upset about something they were doing, their business model, the way they were marketing their products. You thought it was to do with, somehow luring dieters in, people who are obsessed with their appearance, like all these LA people who have all this body consciousness issues and eating disorders, and that they were somehow like drug dealers taking advantage of these people by selling diet sugar-free cookies. And you got triggered by this, and you went off on them on your social media account, your Instagram account, which has 102 million followers. And, some of them were digging what you were doing, and the yogurt shop defended themselves. You picked a fight with them, and they explained, they didn't owe you an explanation, but they did explain their marketing strategy, and you kept on doubling down, and now you realized, that you were wrong. Instead of saying, yeah, you started this, you created this, you were wrong to do it, you accused them of stuff that wasn't factually accurate, and you created this circumstance. You start off by saying you got in the middle of something, like the frozen yogurt place was fighting it out with some dieters, and you got in the middle and stuck up for the dieters, and you were just trying to be a peacekeeper or something. You instigated this fight with your internal misinterpretation of their business model.
Now, I am very outspoken about the things that I believe in. I understand that sometimes my messaging can lose its meaning when I get emotional, right? I am human. I am somebody who is just very passionate about what I believe in, and I've lived through enough to know when to speak up for people who don't have a voice.
You realize you're talking about sugar-free cookies here. They weren't selling crack, right? And she just went through this whole thing where she overdosed, and I guess she was dead for a period of time, and she did a YouTube series on her, addiction and things like this. And she goes into a frozen yogurt shop, and she misinterprets, or she escalates what they're doing to a level where she venomously, again, this is dumping her inner poison on this yogurt company, and now she's excusing her behavior like she was championing other people who can't speak up for themselves. Like this conglomerate yogurt shop, up against these dieters who can't help themselves but eat those sugar-free cookies. And that she's somehow a champion for them, and that, her emotions might have gotten in the way. All these excuses. It's not, just admit you're wrong and that you shouldn't have done what you did. You don't turn your followers on to a business like this based in your having a bad experience and not liking the place, right? I mean, this is what you would complain about in terms of trolls and people that are attacking you all the time, right? People have a bad experience. Like I said, I say this to my viewers. I don't want to hear it. Don't dump your negative energy on me. You see it all the time in the comments. There's all these people who have venom inside of them. I mean, this is a plague on our humanity. People have venom and anger and hatred, and they just want to dump it on somebody else. They just want to unload their poison, their trauma, their toxins on somebody else. And that's what you did here. And just like own up to it, move on, right? Or not, delete it and just, whatever. But these fake apologies where people justify what they're doing, right? Like what you did was wrong and like you know it now. So just say it.
When I messaged this Froyo place, like originally I wanted to make a point and I wanted to call out behaviors or branding things that didn't sit right with me. Because the truth of the matter is your idea that you have to call people out, right? You might think that's what I'm doing here, and it's not. Like when I make these videos, I'm not correcting behavior. I'm not doing this so Demi Lovato watches this and she learns from her mistake, right? I'm not trying to, and that never works. Like if I knew her, obviously, that's, but people I do know, I don't, relish the idea of telling them they suck. I worked as a therapist and a counselor for years. And if it was that easy, I mean, think about how that has never probably worked in your life, where you go and tell somebody they suck and you tell them why they suck and they go, oh yeah, you're right. And they correct it. Like think about the number of times that's worked in your life by telling other people they suck, telling them what they are doing wrong. In this case, she's just made it up. It's not even, they're a business and they're operating under, typical business practices, right? Whether it's negative or not, because we live in a culture of desires and impulse item buying and all these things. In California and these, everywhere, but California specifically, you have people obsessed with their, body size and their bodily appearance and their appearance in general. It's a very superficial place. And so businesses are going to market to those demographics of people who are dieting. So they're going to, have treats. People want to eat treats, but they don't want to gain weight. And so every business, to be successful, has to accommodate those people. And so they're not doing it in some nefarious way where they're trying to hook people onto sugar-free cookies. They're doing it to make money and survive. And again, whether their cookies are healthy, they're not. They're not healthy cookies. They're not, pushing healthy food. Like the Froyo yogurt and all this stuff isn't good for you, no matter what you want to say, right? Sugar takes down your immune system. We have too much sugar and fat in our diet, right? But again, they're not doing it to be evil. They're doing it because, it's a business. And maybe they like yogurt themselves, who knows? But they're not doing this in some nefarious, they're trying to, poison people on purpose. They're just a part of the food system, which is poisoning people. And people desires-based economy. We live in a desire-based system. And Demi Lovato is a part of that. With her, the music she sells, the culture that she's pushing, the videos she's pushing, the ideas behind it, whatever merch she's marketing, she's a part of the Hollywood beast. She grew up in the Hollywood beast. And she wants to call out this one yogurt company when she's embedded in, a dysfunctional system, and she's on a higher level in that system. She's benefited from that system economically in her lifestyle, but she thinks that it's her duty to call out this one place, right? Like everybody wants to call out everyone else. She has a lot in her life, her personal life, and her business, what she's contributing to young people in terms of her crappy music and her, pushing the agenda, right? The Hollywood agenda, all of it. She's doing damage just by being her, and she thinks she's, got to call out this yogurt shop. Like that's her duty. Like she's rocking it. She's a champion for, dieters everywhere, right?
Like these people, across the board, everybody who thinks they have to call other people out, and I mean, people in the truth community, you're not fixing them. You're not doing them a service. What I do here is I show you that Hollywood and success and our materialistic system sucks, and that there's a spiritual alternative. That this, American dream and being a celebrity, I mean, this is the point of all these videos. This is what happens. You got broken people who are, miserable and lost, and they're supposed to be successful. And, almost across the board, they're all wrecked. They're all, dysfunctional, and they're all parasitic, and, they have all this victim consciousness, and they suck energy off of other people, and they're disconnected from God. And it's, the wrong way. But our society says this is what you should be. You should be successful. You should be as famous. And then you see what that does to people, and you realize, oh, those people are worse than everybody else. They're actually worse off, even though they have more money and things like this. And so there's a different way to approach life, which is connect to God internally. That's the point of my videos. Like, I'm not here to correct her or any of these other people. I could care less, right? Because I have my own spiritual journey and my own internal, grossness and, poisons and venom and things that I've absorbed over the years I have to deal with, right? Those are my responsibility to correct myself and, further my spiritual progress. That's why you might sound like I'm judgmental, but I'm really not, right? In the sense of, like, I just don't care. It's not my problem. I'm not triggered or angry by her or anybody else, right? I cover this stuff all the time, and that's why I can do it in a light way, because they're not my problem, right? Like, I'm not here to save them. Like, I'm not here to improve them. I'm not here to make them better, right? I hope they do. I hope everyone gets better. I hope everyone finds God internally, because that would be best for everybody. But that's not my, what these videos are about. Like, they're just an example of people going in the wrong direction. I hope they turn around, but it won't be because of my video, right? This video isn't going to turn her around, or, the people like her, because they're locked into their, path and their belief system, and they're really fragile. I mean, like I said before, in the heartfulness system, where there's life, there's hope. But these celebrities and, people at the top of the system, they have the least hope. They have the least chance, because they're just, they're just embedded in this system, and they're going to go down with the ship.
As someone that deals with an eating disorder, like is in recovery from an eating disorder, I still to this day have a hard time walking into a froyo shop, ordering yogurt, and being content with it and keeping it down. I know that seems like not a huge deal to a lot of people, but for me it is. So by the time I got to the counter, after seeing so much diet stuff and health food stuff, like, it wasn't clear to me that it was for specific health needs. And so I didn't know that. Like, I just took it as, okay, I'm going into a froyo shop, I'm seeing sugar-free, I'm seeing this and that. If there was a sign that said celiac, vegan, I would have understood. That would have been clear messaging to me. Because it wasn't clear, I'm definitely jumped to conclusions. And
see, this is what I was talking about in the introduction, and this is, what I referenced in the video yesterday about broken people thinking that it's everybody else's responsibility to change the external world to accommodate their internal deficits. Because eating disorders suck. I'm not minimizing eating disorders or any of the psychological aberrations that people deal with, right? People deal with various levels of addiction and coping mechanisms and, things that are unhealthy for them. And so they develop these things inside of them that are not good, psychological issues that are not good. They're things that are hurting them, destroying them from the inside. In the heartfulness system, these things can be cleaned out. Like, I know, from my own experience, but other people who have had issues like this, because, people have issues like this, and they get cleaned away, over time by the cleaning method in the heartfulness system. For example, And then there's other people that have cured themselves or have adapted through psychological means or just by the force of their will. They're able to get rid of this program inside of them, whatever it might be, eating disorder, gambling addiction, abusive tendencies, whatever it is, right? People have, overcome these things. Human beings overcome these things. So there's examples of people out there, and there are systems out there. Like I think the heartfulness system is the most efficacious if people use it correctly. And people have to want to get rid of their stuff because they become attached to it, and they become attached to being a victim. And that's one of the biggest problems here. People like to be, considered a victim, and so they want to interpret the world in a way that, they're getting screwed over. And that's I'm going to give a solution for this. I'll talk more about this and how I dealt with this in my own experience, that when things seem unfair and you realize that it's inside of you, and I'll elaborate more on this, and you take responsibility for the external world, pointing out things in your internal world you have to clean out, right? And so, there's this process or this thought in the counseling world that you're going to be a recovering person the rest of your life. You're going to be a recovering addict. You're going to be a recovering, person with eating disorders. You're going to be a recovering person with depression. And that's just something you have to live with the rest of your life. You're going to be recovering from, abuse that you suffered as a kid or whatever it is. And at some point, you don't have to be that anymore. Like, you don't have to be recovering. You can just eradicate that from your internal system. You can purge it out of your internal system, get rid of it, clean it out, from inside your psychological makeup. And then this is no longer an issue for you. You're no longer tempted. You're no longer whatever. But in her case, she isn't, she's saying that she's recovering and that she's still triggered by these things. Then why are you going into a frozen yogurt shop? Like, if these are things that are going to trigger you, you don't go into a place like this and expect not to be triggered and blame what's going on inside of you on their business model, right? Like, this is the ultimate in the broken people demanding, they're all outraged and demand that society change, their way of being, that everything in the material world has to change to accommodate their dysfunction on the inside. I mean, this is what's being pitched by the powers that be. They are, they're out there pushing this idea that all of us are supposed to accommodate, the people that are out there. And I'm not saying I'm one of them. There's just, good people that are wholesome people that are out there. I'm dyslexic, and I'm my own, like, kind of different person. But there are people out there that are just doing hard work every day, delivering food, growing food, delivering services, delivering the things that all of us, use and all of us benefit from, that they keep the beast going. And those people are supposed to now have to think more about the broken people and how they might offend them, by doing their job or whatever it is, by participating in society. Like, this yogurt company was supposed to figure out that these sugar-free cookies were somehow going to, trigger Demi Lovato, and they need to label them better. And, like that, they have to accommodate her and her triggeredness and her brokenness and her butthurtness, right?
Probably shouldn't have, gone about this the way that I have, but I'm willing to talk to this froyo shop to help get the messaging right.
See, think of the arrogance there. And this might be some stage thing where she's worked this out with them and they're doing this, sort of as performance art, as just another way to push these ideas. But think about what she's saying there, that she is the person that knows how to get the messaging right. Now, this is a person who has had, like she said, eating disorders, suffers from lots of psychological issues, and has been an addict and OD'd to the extent that she, I believe she was dead for a period of time, and she suffered brain damage. That's, she's living with that stuff now. The overdose affected her, and I think she's overdosed maybe more than once. And her life is a mess, and she's a mess. But she's one of the people that thinks that she should be in charge of this business and messaging. You understand this? Like, she's that broken, and she thinks she's in charge of telling them how to run their business, right? Like, I say this to people on my YouTube channel all the time. Don't tell me how to run my YouTube channel. Like, you have no concept of what it's like on my end. Not that I'm complaining, not that I'm a victim or whining, but there's so much you don't know that I've done to keep this channel going, and the type of channel it is that's being hunted and, erased from YouTube and, being targeted, and the information that I put out here. I mean, all of it that I've have to, and just looking at the abyss every day and making it financially viable because it's my job. If I don't make money, I can't produce videos. Like, I can't do this for free. And so there's so many things that go into this that you know nothing about. My particular circumstances and what I'm doing here, So when I get people who think that they know more because they've watched a couple videos and, they've never made a video, they don't understand, how to articulate things to people, or, how to, I had to go through a whole thing because I am not, I get these comments. I got a comment today. I was reading through the comments and someone said, you just articulate things so clearly and you're able to explain things in an understandable way. And that was not how I used to be at all. I was the opposite. I talked too fast. I overloaded information on people. And, they would walk away confused and not understanding. My mind actually works very quickly. And so, like, when I played board games with my parents, I got tired of them waiting on them to make the right move. So I would make their moves for them, which, made the game kind of pointless. But I would see them laboring, right? And I'm like, this is what you need to do. Like, this is, And so I had to slow all that down. People complain about that I talk slowly, but I did that as a way, there's a couple of reasons for it, but I just had to slow things down and then listen to the videos like I'm a person who doesn't know what I'm talking about, and I'm not me, and what it would be like for somebody else listening to those videos. You understand this? And so I had to change the way I communicate because I wasn't very clear in what I was saying, and people didn't understand what I was saying. And once in a while, you can see I get sped up a little bit, and and then I'll pack a lot of information, and sometimes I have to redo it, sometimes I don't, but it's harder to understand. That's why I talk slowly, and I fully articulate my points. Because in the past, I might start a sentence and then have another idea in the middle of the sentence and not complete the first sentence. You'll see that sometimes I do that here, that I don't complete a thought. And so there's a lot, what I'm saying, that I had to change in my, how I communicate with people. And there's things that I had to work on, and, whatever, verbal tics and things like this, just to make my videos easier to watch and more understandable. And so when people come in and they're like, oh, this is what you should do, I'm like, you know nothing about it. Like, just why are you flapping your gums? Like, it is, when I've said over and over again, you might not agree. You're more than welcome to disagree. Just don't tell me about it. Like, I've already moved on from the video. It's not helpful for me. It's not going to change my opinion. And certainly don't tell me how to run my YouTube channel. I don't operate a complaint department. And so when people have a business and you get triggered by their business, right, and you might have no idea what's going on their end. My family went out to dinner last night, and I have a very fast metabolism, like the fastest metabolism, which I just learned when my family and I got some blood work done. My wife was the one was somehow found out, was telling me about it, and I didn't think about it, but it made sense. And so I often get headaches if I get hungry, and there's things about that, right? And we went out to dinner, and there's a restaurant that we had gone to a couple of times, maybe during the, when they were taking temperatures when you walk through the door and all that stuff. Now you don't even have to wear a mask. And the business, we went in there, and they were desperately understaffed. And I've been reading that lots of people are, there's all these available jobs, some of them great jobs, and people aren't taking them. People want to stay unemployed for various reasons. They don't want to go back out into the workforce. Maybe they've had they've stayed at home for a while and they realize, oh, that's what they'd rather do or whatever it is, right? And so there's all these good jobs out there in society, good paying jobs, and certainly jobs like in the restaurant industry that aren't maybe as good paying. And this place was understaffed. They didn't have enough people cooking, and now they're having people are packing into the restaurant. This was a Monday night, and it was packed on the inside, and they had to go orders. And there was one woman who seated us, and she was our waitress, and she had an attitude. She was grumpy, and I've worked in restaurants before, and so has my wife. We both waited tables, and so we know and we're compassionate to that thing. But I mean, it was just kind of a shitty experience because the food was overcooked because they don't have enough people cooking, and everything came out at once, and they made mistakes, and they're running around. They have like one guy who was it's a kind of a smallish restaurant, but usually it takes probably 2 or 3 servers on a regular night, a busy night, and they had one who wasn't very good, and they had like an overweight guy with his mask on his chin, like he wasn't even wearing it correctly, and he was running around sweating. He was the manager, right? And they had one guy in the kitchen cooking, and I guess there's a hostess that I didn't see, but my wife said there's a hostess there, and it was clearly understaffed, right? But I could complain or be angry and yell at them or whatever it is, but it was because they were understaffed, and it's a circumstance. It's another casualty of Corona or COVID, right? You see this happening, across the board. People aren't going back to work, and now we have a society that's operating on a skeleton crew of people who themselves will end up quitting because they're overworked now. And so I could see, what was happening. And the guy even said they're, understaffed. And so, what are you going to do? Yell at people for, trying to compensate for a crappy position they're in. And so it's, that's life out there. But this Hollywood celebrity who has had a miserable life and she's broken in various ways thinks that she should, tell people how to run their businesses on Instagram, and there are 102 million followers.
Another thing that a lot of people don't know, I guess it's something that must be an LA thing. A lot of people who have struggled with anorexia, I myself, like, froyo was something that I would go to because it was low in calorie and it just felt safe to me. I know that people struggle with froyo, with eating disorders. So that's why I'm super sensitive when I walk into a froyo place and I see diet stuff. Like, I'm gonna be protective. I'm protective of the little girl inside of me that didn't get that representation at a young age of someone saying, all of this diet stuff is not okay. You're worth more than that.
By being protective, you mean attacking this business on Instagram, and turning your followers against them, right? Because that's what you did. That's not being protective. Like, you could have made an Instagram video and talked about what you're saying now and not named the business and just say it's a systemic problem. Like, you went after an individual business when this is a systemic problem. The way that we are about food and the way people specifically in California and Hollywood, but, all over the world, are about body image and about, all these things in terms of superficial appearance. I mean, this is something that's come out of Hollywood, a system that you're, a big part of. You're a part of the Hollywood beast. You grew up on Disney. Your success is in the Hollywood beast that pushed these body image issues and then the marketing behind it and, everybody dieting, everybody, trying to have six-pack abs. I mean, all these things. So you had all of this stuff. You're a part of the problem. And this yogurt company is, trying to make a little money off of people wanting to eat, vegan stuff or gluten-free stuff or diet stuff and sugar-free stuff. And again, it's a froyo place, It's not a temple. It's not, responsible for the upliftment of humanity. It's about dessert and sugar obsession that people have. Sugar is a big deal. And so she's coming out and saying all these things like she's protective of herself as an inner child of herself, but you don't have to go there. Like just because you feel safe about froyo, like you don't have to go into the business. Like you don't have to be a part of that experience. You just don't go back, right? And if you want to call this out on Instagram, this as a systemic problem, the sugar problem that we have, like we have fat and sugar, which are binge. Like in nature, animals will devour sugar and fat when they come upon it because they're like energy sources and they don't really exist in nature. Fruit, the fruits that we have been cultivated to get the sweetest fruit. Fruit used to be, sour. I mean, if you eat wild fruit, like things that are, that haven't been cultivated by man, they're going to be sour. I mean, most food is going to have much different taste, bitter taste, and you can't find fat anywhere. If you look at animals, right? Like you look at domesticated animals like cows that have been fed, whatever, are to bulk up their system. But in the wild, cows are much more skinny, right? Animals aren't, don't have as much body fat, wild animals, as the ones that people eat. And so you have all this fat in our system, which is something people crave. People crave fat and crave sugar because it's very rare. Things like honey, right? That's why animals are willing to stick their face in a beehive because it's very rare. And so these are things that have been cultivated by our system, and people have been addicted to them, become addicted to them based in, a primary urge that you've been told, all right, this binge mechanism that if you find fat, you're supposed to eat it up, right? Because you're not, fat's a rarity. And so you have this in our impulse items and all the rest of it. But talk about it as a systemic issue, and then talk about the Hollywood LA culture that you're a part of that has created this and that you still are benefiting from financially, right? She could, talk about this systemically like I do all the time here. But to single out this one shop, and maybe she's promoting them, who knows what's really going on here. But in terms of the way that she did this, it's the wrong way. And then to say she's protecting like her inner child, right?
I also am standing up for just anyone who struggles in LA. Like this is the whole country, fuck it. Like this is a hard thing to live with on a daily basis. The thing about overcoming my addictions, my drug addictions, was because I can walk away from that and never touch it again for the rest of my life. Like, I don't ever have to do that, but I have to eat 3 times a day. This is something that will be with me for the rest of my life. I left that yogurt store and didn't get the yogurt that I wanted. And then I had a hard time the rest of the weekend.
So again, this is where, see all this victim stuff that she's saying here about, all the things that she's experienced, having an eating disorder and being, an addict, and she didn't get her yogurt because she was triggered by the cookies, and it was their fault. They triggered her because they didn't have the proper messaging. And, it's a systemic problem. And, say that growing up as a Disney kid, and say that thinking that being famous, and look at what fame has done to her, right? Like she's a wreck. She's been broken by Hollywood like so many other people. And that's what you should be talking about. That you've been broken so bad by Hollywood, you walk into a froyo shop and have some sort of a meltdown, and then come out on Instagram and attack the yogurt shop, right? Like you've been made into something internally by the Hollywood culture and the music industry and all of it, and it's broken you, to where you've almost died from it, right? This is your story. And it's froyo. It's this little froyo because they're selling sugar-free cookies. Like, this is a systemic problem. Our system sucks. This is what I was saying yesterday. Some people asked me, I said, this isn't a good system for me. I'm dyslexic. I'm an introvert. And like the materialistic aspect of the American system was never something that, really appealed to me, really didn't understand my place. I mean, I struggled with the system in various ways. But as an older person, I've accepted it. This is the system I was born into. And people are like, well, do you mean communism? I don't know. This person wrote this comment. No, I'm not talking about isms. Like, just, like the way that the world works right now at this particular time in the Kali Yuga and our system, because we don't have a capitalist system or a communist system. Those are all things that people use as a way, it's the same system. A bunch of people on top who are exploiting and, basically enslaving the people on the bottom through materialistic means and disconnecting them from God and the family and what's natural. And, we're out of the flow of what it is to be a natural human being. And so most of us would do better in another system, but this is a system we're given and it's collapsing. So there's that, right? And we all have to, cope with it, right? We all have to do our best. And it's because of the free time and the wealth that, like in her case, she has, that people can have things like eating disorders, right? When you're struggling just to survive, you don't have time for those. There's this thing called the worried well. It's the people who live in suburbs and the wealthy people that go into therapy and they have, solvable problems. But there's people all over the world that live in hell that are struggling with poverty and just surviving and, abusive systems that are, totalitarian systems that are, a bunch of thugs and bullies that are running the system in a way that we're protected from in America. Like, we don't understand the kind of oppression other people are undergoing. And to think that you can indulge in this idea of having, issues with food, like, you have so much food, you can throw it up, right? Where people are, they don't have enough food for their family every day, right? And this is even in America, but all over the world. People are starving. Kids are starving. It's 25,000 kids starve a day, right? It's crazy. It's even more since COVID. It's up to, I believe, 50,000 kids are starving every day since the shutdowns. And so, that you would have this, privilege that you could have issues with food because you have too much of it, right? And that's America. And that's what she's talking about. Like, say it's a systemic problem.
To be totally transparent. And that's probably something that nobody wants me to say. Like, I don't know, but I'm human and I talk about my struggles and I'm passionate. So I'm sorry that I got the messaging wrong. I'm sorry that I may have disappointed some people, but I'm not coming after a small business as someone with a lot of followers. That's not what I'm doing here.
That's exactly what you did. That's 100% not true. Like, that's 100% false. Because you wouldn't have named the name of the business. You could have said, I went to this place and this is what happened. But you were mad at them. They wrecked your weekend, as you said. You didn't like the way they were running their business, and you knew you had this power, which is your, fans on Instagram. Everyone knows this, that if you say things, your fans are going to go and react and troll, and, God knows what they did. I mean, we're talking about 102 million fans, and they're all, especially after your recent YouTube series where you talk about your addiction, so they're full into you being a victim and they think they have to stand up for you. I mean, think about Britney's fans. If Britney did something like this, right, who are just rabid and want to go and mount a rescue mission for her, right? And so, this is you going after the business by naming names and the way that you framed it. This was you attacking the business. That's exactly what you were doing. If you want to raise awareness, you could have done it without naming the name of the business. Again, like, this is fundamentally dishonest. This is her kind of admitting she's wrong by saying she's really right,
I walked into a situation that didn't sit right with me. My intuition said, speak up about this. So I did. And I feel good about that. What I don't feel good about is some of the way that it's been interpreted and how the message has gotten misconstrued over all of it. I will do whatever I can to work with this froyo shop if they want to help align the messaging so where I feel safe going in there and I can eat the froyo that I went in there for.
Wow, you're a saint, right? You're willing to go in there and work with them, to fix their, their business and their marketing strategy so that you can feel good going in there. Wow, I didn't realize you were so generous. You're willing to go and fix them the way you think they should be fixed.
I will work with them on that. That is something I'm dedicated to do because I want to make LA and this whole country a safer, and this whole fucking world a safer environment. People with eating disorders should be able to go in and feel safe wherever they go to eat. That's all I'm asking. Literally all I'm asking. So I'm so sorry if it got misconstrued.
That's, the worst type of apology. I'm sorry you misunderstood how right I was. I'm sorry you misinterpreted how right I was. And you guys, she wants to fix the world. Well, you targeted this one shop and in a way that was inappropriate in the first place. Your whole reaction was your reaction. They're not responsible for your reaction. They're not responsible for your eating disorder. They're not responsible for your upbringing and your samskaras and your, Hollywood culture stuff. Nobody else is. And that you want to fix the outside world to accommodate this dysfunction, right? Like this dysfunction that's happening all across the world. And, people who are former addicts or former gambling, whatever it might be, former whatever they are, right? Reformed people are the worst, and they're the ones who think they have the answer. It's the people that have been healthy and didn't engage and indulge and didn't get hooked in to these things that have, maybe done this in a previous existence or whatever it is. They're the ones that should be, running the world, right? The people that are good at being human beings, even in a dysfunctional system. It's not the broken. The broken always thinks they know how to fix it, right? Because they've been through it. But usually they're just, still in their addiction. They've never really, they've never evolved past it and it's still lingering. And so they're coming from it on the perspective of a broken person. A broken person can't fix a dysfunctional system, right? It just, because they don't know. They're still, they're being broken. They're broken, and being broken means that you don't know how to function and you don't know what health is, right? You know how to be broken, but you don't know how to be healthy.
I don't always get this right. I speak my mind, I'm opinionated, and then sometimes I get labeled as problematic. It's not because I'm looking out to, everything that I'm doing is well intentioned. You have to understand. It's just, look, someone once told me, you can be a celebrity and get it right every day of your life, but you get it wrong one day, and that's what people focus on.
So you think your track record is 1,000,001? Like, you have all these problems, all these broken problems. It's not that you got it wrong once, and none of that stuff matters. I mean, she's worried about being, judged in these things. But you see how self-involved she is in this thing. Like, what you should learn from this is that when you attack a business for something that's very personal to you, that isn't the business fault or other people, and you have a big following, and they troll the business and, people get upset, that you made a mistake and you went about it the wrong way. Like, and you're still trying to come off like you're some sort of a hero, right? This is how people self-perceive, that she was, the champion of all the people like her. But that wasn't the case. You didn't get your frozen yogurt because you got triggered by some sugar-free cookies and you wrecked your weekend, and so you blasted them on Instagram. This isn't Gandhi stuff here.
And that's what people are focusing on today, and that's okay. Because tomorrow, I'm still going to live my truth. I'm still going to get up and meditate and do what I need to do to stay centered. I just want to help continue to make this world a better place. And if it upsets some people, I'm so sorry. And I will listen and try to understand and how I can better be of support to all communities, not just people with eating disorders, but of all communities. And
See, the main problem here is she believes she's making the world a better place. And clearly she hasn't done that through her life, her personal life, but mostly through her work, which is singing crappy music that has a negative message for kids, that she's not a healthy person and the music she's putting out, and the establishment, the Hollywood establishment, is negative. It's bringing people in the wrong direction. There's a reason for it. Like, there's a means to an end. Our civilization's collapsing, and so it's pulling to the surface a lot of things that have to come to the surface. So there's, it's a part of a plan, like I talked about in the beginning of this video. There's reasons for all this, but she's not making the world a better place. What she did on Instagram, the frozen yogurt stuff, right? Like, if you're going to get to the systemic problem, you're going to have to go after Disney. You're going to have to go after the celebrity culture. You're going to have to go after all the people involved in bringing humanity down, including the politicians and, the people that you're supporting. You're not making the world a better place. Like, there's no celebrity that you can say is making the world a better place. Maybe they put out like a good song that, helps to elevate people in some way, bring them closer to God, right? I mean, meditating is great if you're meditating in the right way, but people are meditating all the time in the wrong way. Like, I do the heartfulness meditation where you're meditating directly on the source, and it connects you to God within, and it starts to elevate you from the inside out. And so that's, a positive way, the appropriate way to meditate. But if you meditate on bad ideas in your ego, well, you're just going to make those things stronger. And your lies and self-delusions that you're somehow a champion out there doing good things.
Yeah, I think I'm rambling. Anyways, I just wanted to get that message across. It's really important that everyone hears that my intentions were not to come in and bully a small business. That was not it. I walked in, was so triggered that I left without froyo, and it made me really sad.
Alex, I'll take things a child says for 500. I can't. Alex is gone, right? Alex Trebek. Alex Trebek's replacement. I'll take things a child would say for $500. Really can't do that joke anymore. That's one of my favorite jokes. Look at the self-involvement here, right? See, she's saying that she went into the yogurt shop, got so triggered she left without yogurt, and then she went home and had a weekend, and then decided to post this stuff on Instagram and attack the small business. And now she's trying to, somehow claim victimhood in all this. I mean, from the very beginning of this so-called apology, it's all about how she's right and she's been a victim, how she wants to make the world a better place, and if everyone just listened to her and, she went to the business and they're willing to, fix themselves for her reaction, right? Like, it's all of these things. She's willing to work with them, tell them how to run their business. I mean, think about the arrogance here. And this is, Hollywood at its finest.
And that's all it was. And I wanted to talk about that. So if we can make this environment safer for everyone, including people that are in recovery from an eating disorder and just want a little froyo, if we can do that while also giving froyo to vegans and people with diabetes, let's go. Let's fucking go. Let's do it.
So I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to, expand on the solution in a second, but just to comment on what you just said, to make that a safe environment. This frozen yogurt place is unsafe because they're selling diet cookies. Like that's where we are as a culture and a people. Is that what we're about right now? This is her saying, like, let's make the world a safe place from diet cookies, and by just putting up some words and saying, oh, this is for vegans, this is for whatever, and the whole thing, she went off on their marketing campaign. That's unsafe. Frozen yogurt places are unsafe. There's people who live, there's bullets whizzing by their heads. People live in war-torn places in poverty where they're worried about their kids being grabbed and enslaved and things like this. People live in, hell all over the world. And, in the history of human beings, like, people got eaten by animals and stuff, and we even have that now. And you're saying frozen yogurt places are unsafe because they sell sugar-free cookies? Like that. That's your point. You have no point, right? See, if that's a level of brokenness of our society and of our, what we are as human beings, and we're so screwed, Like, this place isn't safe. They have some sugar-free cookies there. They're unsafe. You're unsafe inside yourself, right? And if that's how broken people are, which, in many cases it is, and there's this push to accommodate this level of brokenness in people, which there is on social media and everything else, at least some groups of people, it's so effed up, right? And so, well, that's enough of her. Let me get into the solution aspect of this. So, there is, I don't know what you want to call it, a situation or a problem or experience where something happens to a person. Maybe you've experienced this, or at least know about this sort of, I don't know, dilemma or problem, or, I don't know, paradox, whatever you want to call it, where something happens and it's pretty harsh. It's brutal, right? It's something that's, on one level, it's traumatic. On another level, it seems unfair in terms of cause and effect, right? That when you evaluate this reaction you're getting, this effect that you're getting in your life, it doesn't make any sense. You can evaluate your life, your intentions, your work, the things that you've done, and this effect, this reaction, this thing that's just happened to you doesn't make any sense based in the causalities, right? What could have caused this horrible thing to happen to you, especially if you're a kid? I mean, these are things where kids are traumatized and they have these thoughts throughout their life because they're, an innocent child, right? What can a child do to have such horrible things happen to them? Like, what has a child done in this life as a child? What could they possibly do to generate such a horrible calamity, miserable things that happen to them, whether it be abuse or, trauma, loss of parents? I mean, whatever it is, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why did I deserve this? And if you're a godly person, you believe in God, and you start saying to yourself, what did I do to deserve this? You made a mistake, God, right? This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't, in a cause and effect universe, there's no cause for me to be suffering this way. This is a lot of times why people lose faith in God, because something happens and it doesn't make any sense. Like, in terms of an equation, there's nothing in the causality part of the equation that could lead up to such a horrible thing happening to a person. And so the person starts having doubts. They start feeling like a victim. They get mad at God, whatever it might be, because they just can't understand why this has happened to them. Especially, because I went through this in my case, where I believed, and I still believe I was following God's plan, doing what God wanted me to do. And it appeared to me, or at least God, in my estimation, led me to believe that at the end of this thing, the end of what I was doing, the quest my family and I was on, the experiment we were conducting, living in a homestead, and our goal of an intergenerational family farm, and these things were going to yield better results. Like, there was some purpose for it, there was some reason for doing it, and failure wasn't one of them, right? The failure and the marriage falling apart and all the things that I live with, plus there's other things that I'll discuss in a moment. And so, it didn't make sense. And people believe in karma, right? This idea of good karma and bad karma. And they're like, what would happen that I deserve such bad karma? And the way that people think about karma isn't correct. I've talked about samskaras, which is an impression from a past life. And again, it's not that you're being punished for your past life. You have unresolved things from a past life that you were involved in, impressions, and you didn't master those experiences. And so, but it's hard to see a past life. It's hard to understand what happened in a past life or previous existence. And so, and many people aren't open to that idea. And so it's hard to understand why these horrible things happen, especially when it's the beginning of something. When the horrible thing happened, it's the beginning of the horrible thing, right? And maybe things come out of it later on that you didn't foresee. Maybe at the end you're like, well, I understand why that happened now. But at the beginning, it's hard to see. You're in a state of shock and the rest of it. And so this is one of the reasons people have victim consciousness, because things happen that seem completely unfair and, almost like you're being punished for something you didn't do. And you ultimately, people ultimately find their way to blaming God because at some point you have to say, all right, well, there's people who are responsible or there's, circumstances, but ultimately, if you believe in God or at least have an idea that God might exist, you're going to say, well, why did God do this? Why does God allow these things or make these things happen? And I've discussed this before in terms of people having freedom of choice. And that's one answer to this. Why does God allow bad things to happen? There's another answer, and that is that these things that we go through, traumas, difficulties, are ways to expose things in ourself that we need to clean out, that need to be removed, that need to be pulled out. If we have hate in our system, then things are going to have to happen outside of ourselves where we're going to look at other people and hate them. And then we're going to see our own hate inside us. And hopefully, or what's supposed to happen, this is what the heartfulness system does, is to work towards getting rid of the hate in your own system, right? So if you hate somebody, and I've said this before, earlier in this video, I believe, the hate is your hate. So if you're having to deal with a miserable, awful, terrible person, and that person's actions is causing negativity in you, hatred and anger and fear and all these things, and it's pulling it out of your system so that you can remove it, you can get rid of it, and no longer live with that in your life, well, it's a wonderful gift. So it's not even, instead of blaming God, it's like, well, God, thank you for providing me with this opportunity to expunge something from my system that is, horrible, right? And I've talked about this before, but, I want to give a few more details about this. Of course, recently, a couple of weeks ago now, I think it is, my daughter Anna had committed suicide, and she had moved out, I guess, 4 years ago now, almost 5 years ago. And for years there was issues. There was self-abusive behaviors, cutting behaviors, and things like this. At the center of our family was a person, the relationship I was in, that had, according to her stories, had suffered childhood abuse, right? And some of her coping behaviors, this is, my ex, were, she told me she had been hospitalized for a suicide attempt, and, she cut herself, and, that continued on during our marriage, to the point where whenever there was an argument, I had to hide the knives. And it's much worse than I'm talking about here, like the stress. And, until the marriage ended, I really didn't understand how much it was sucking the life out of me, these, behaviors. And it was, I'm saying this because to go with this Demi Lovato thing, there are people who are self-abusive and they engage in cutting behaviors, right? And in this case, there was a mother, in my life, and then passing these behaviors on to her daughter because, each parent, each person knows the dysfunction or should know dysfunction in their own family. Like lots of us are conscious of the dysfunction in the family we grew up, our parents and our siblings, that dysfunction. And, we don't want to bring it into a new family. Some people are oblivious. They don't even realize their old family sucked and they, just pass on these behaviors. But some of us realize, that we are in a dysfunctional family and that we don't want our family, when we raise kids, to have those same behaviors passed on to them. And, in my case, I could see things in my family. I wasn't in contact with my family for that reason because, I was changing and becoming a better person through the heartfulness meditation. And I didn't want to go back and engage in some of the behaviors, the old behaviors that, I learned from my family and things that were still inside me, right? And sometimes when you go back to your old family or you hang out with your old friends, you regress and you become immature, right? You just go back and play the same role you played years ago, even though you've evolved and changed into a much different person. And that's, that's for everybody. But in terms of what happened with my ex, she never was able to take responsibility for these behaviors, self-abusive behaviors and victim consciousness and things like this. And that got passed on to the kids in one way or another, the family. And certainly with Anna, in terms of these self-abusive behaviors, copying them verbatim, right? There's a hospitalization and the cutting. And having been through that on the other end, right? Because it affects the whole family when you have people who are engaging in what's becoming very commonplace with young people, which is cutting themselves, right? And how that is for loved ones, how it is for other members of the family, especially if it leads eventually to suicide, and you're involved in a long grieving process for somebody that you love as they go down this path, right? They never quite are able to figure out a way to cope with, and like Demi Lovato's talking about her eating disorder and her addiction, all these things. At some point, you have to just, figure out a way. And again, this is available in the heartfulness system where there's cleaning, where this stuff can get cleaned out. Especially, you have to work at it as well, where you can leave these behaviors and the things that cause these behaviors, and that's the most important part, things that are inside of you behind. That this coping mechanism, these, ways of behaving is cleaned out so you don't have to do them anymore. And the emotions and the trauma that causes these behaviors are cleaned out. Going back to the beginning of this video, where you cope, right? And the heartfulness system allows you to do this. And so I'm giving this example because it's something that I went through, right? And, it was extraordinarily beneficial spiritually, but it sucked going through. Like, there was, in any marriage, in any family, there is potential to go in the right direction, right? In any life, somebody can go in the right way or the wrong way. People often straddle. I mean, you have people who are living, they're good, productive citizens, and then something happens, there's a catalyst, and, they've gone to the dark side. There was this treatment center I worked in for adults. It was like sort of for rich people. Like some of them were semi-famous people. Really rich people would go and dry out there for their alcohol addiction, or, people who had suffered some sort of trauma and whatever, and they would go there to cope. It wasn't the best place. I don't think it was very effective. But one of my jobs was, I was in graduate school. I was working to get my master's in counseling. And one of my jobs was to pick people up at the airport. And sometimes they would, go get drunk, or they use drugs on the plane. And, one time this young woman walked right by me and just went into the airport. She knew I was there to pick her up, and she was already drunk. And, things like this happen. But in this story, there was this woman who I was supposed to pick up who was a judge, like a prominent judge in a big city, like sort of a famous person. And she had started smoking crack and loved it. And she blew through her whole bank account. She was married, a prominent family in this, in the city, with kids and these things. And she ended up prostituting herself so she could get money to buy crack. Like, this all happened in like a 3-month span. Completely wrecked her life, right? And she had been a productive person in society, but the samskara was there, the addiction samskara, and she just lost it. And she didn't show up. Like, I never found her in the airport. We didn't even know if she got on the plane. And so, as far as I know, she died of some sort of crack addiction related type of activities. And she was, again, a prominent person. But then on the other hand, you have people who are criminals or miserable people, horrible people. St. Paul was an example of this, who have a change in consciousness and they become spiritual and a saint. So there are these fluctuations, and, you can never say how things are going to go. And everybody, when you look at your own kids or people in your life, and, they have good qualities and bad qualities, and you just hope things turn for them in the right direction, right? You see problems for them that they have to overcome. They have inner issues, they have difficulties inside of themselves, and then they have to overcome these things. They're going to be faced with these difficulties because of their personality configurations and whatever it is. And so you have these concerns for your kids and, people in your life, because until they face up to those things, until they've experienced those things, you don't know how it's going to go. And in terms of my family, there was always the chance that it would go in a positive direction. And I had hope, I believed it would end up that way, but it went in the other direction in, like a seismic type of way. And I realized that, every marriage you can categorize like as like maybe a romantic comedy or a tragedy or a drama. And I would categorize my marriage as a horror story. I mean, literally, that's how I would look at it. It was like a horror story when I look back at it and think about, just all the stuff that was involved. If it was made into a movie, it'd be a horror show, right? It'd be a horror story. And so there was a failure aspect of it. There was a disappointment. There was like, anger, and, there's the blame, all the things that come up during one of these types of situations, and having to reinvent my family life and all these things. Now, like there was going to be big changes and all the things that went with it. And it wasn't just about my family and my ex. It was a lot of things that involved the heartfulness meditation and just all these, the system and other people. And so there's a lot there, as the way that, I was perceived and, just all of it. And so someday I'll tell like the whole story in a detailed fashion. But I was, pretty wiped out. Like I was worn down and, and it just seemed really unfair based in, my intentions and what I thought was supposed to happen, or, the eventual goal that I thought was going to be reached that wasn't, right? In fact, it was really the exact opposite. And just these negative feelings, and there was a resentment towards God that I felt like that came up from a past life, and I had past life memories about it, and I just realized that this circumstance, the negativity that I was experiencing, what I considered to be unfair and sort of a nightmare situation, was really a gift to pull this inner poison out of my system. And so taking this idea that this was something to be grateful for, and that I was supposed to experience. It wasn't a mistake. God didn't make a mistake, and my soul didn't make a mistake, and the heartfulness system didn't make a mistake. That I was supposed to experience this. That it wasn't something I was a victim of. When I changed my perception of it, and I used the tools at my disposal, the heartfulness system, getting individual sittings. These sittings you get where your heart is cleaned on a deep level, these some scars are cleaned. And when I, use these tools by working towards excising out this like cancer that was inside my system, a resentment and anger towards God. Like I could feel it, I could see it, it was there. Like every morning I would meditate and it was there. And so I just dove into the heartfulness system and the cleaning aspect. And it took, I think, about 3 months, and it was removed. It was just gone. And like I can't express to anybody how I felt afterwards, right? How much better I felt. It was like this burden I'd carried for lifetimes. There's probably nothing worse than anger or resentment towards God in terms of, being debilitating to a person's existence, blaming God for things, feeling like a victim or whatever. And when it was cleared out of my system, like I'm making more serotonin now. Like I'm just happier and better, and my life has changed in, astronomical ways towards the positive. I've made, my spiritual evolution has gone in leaps and bounds, and my new marriage is just like complete opposite, right? Just, wonderful. And so all of these things, were just a reflection of what it was like to no longer have this burden I'd been carrying inside myself for years. That's why I'm such a, I just love the heartfulness system because it's been so effective for me. Now, this is just, the latest example, but the best example. And I've often thought to myself, if just this one thing was cleaned out of my system in this life, it's worth it. Like my whole life and my whole spiritual practice is worth it just to have that burden removed. I mean, that's how much of a difference it was and how I feel now. But it was taking the attitude that there was, reasons why I was experiencing something that on a cause and effect level in this life seemed unfair, that God had sort of screwed me over. I mean, that's what it felt like God has sort of bait and switched me, like for some malicious reason. Like I don't know why that would be, but that's how I first looked at it, and from a victim perspective. And so that's why I say this to everybody, because what I went through was really pretty horrible. Like, there's a lot more here I'm not saying, and it still continues in some way. Like how I'm perceived by people, especially some of the people that do the meditation, even the leadership of the heartfulness system, and their narrative of me and what kind of person they think I am. And, a lot of it just sucks, but it just doesn't really bother me anymore because of this event, right? And that's why I'm able to, do what I do here and see what I see and realize that, it looks bad now, what's happening in the world, but what's going to happen after it purges out? Like there's a purging out of negativity and selfishness and, all these things that are coming to the surface, this Hollywood culture of divas and entitled people, and, how everybody's more selfish now, and just the lack of love and the disconnect from God and nature and, true human, behaviors, natural human behaviors, that this is something we have to go through, but it will, turn into something good after this cycle, after this phase is over. And so I'm saying this, because there is a way to deal with all these things. You don't have to be a victim your whole life and feel like the world's unfair and, whatever's going on. Like I said, either you believe in God or you don't. If you do, there's a plan. And so that plan involves you having sucky things happen to you in your life that seem unfair. And if you believe in chaos, well, chaos, eventually bad things are going to happen to you. So there's no reason to feel like a victim, right? But if you do believe in a plan, then experiencing these things, these negative things, with the attitude that you're supposed to experience them. It's not a mistake. You're supposed to go through this thing. And why? What's the reason for that? And then, when it comes to the surface, like for my example, it pulled out something negative from my system and showed me something, right? If you are feeling hatred, well, the reason is you have to get rid of your hatred. If you're feeling anger and fear and negativity, you have to purge those out of your system. And if people and things are showing you that in your system, well, then, that's because it's doing you a favor and showing you what you have to change inside yourself to move forward. And there's tools, like the heartfulness system is built for this process. And I guess there's other tools out there as well, in terms of ways people can get rid of negativity inside of them. I think the heartfulness system's the best, but whatever it is, right? And I know it works because I've experienced it. And so seeing things inside yourself that you don't want there, it feels bad to hate. It feels bad to be angry. It feels bad, and anger can be a motivational. Sometimes anger can be something that's positive. It can help you change if you do it in the right way. It can help you motivate you. But these negative qualities that people feel, bitterness and, resentment and these things. And when you have those in your system, like I could sit around just being hateful and resentful towards my ex and other people that, on paper it looks like they screwed me over or whatever it is. But I don't do that because it feels crappy inside myself. And it's not, things that are done towards you, negative things that are done towards you, people's negative opinions about you, lies that are told about you, all this stuff that you have in your life is, that's them, right? It's not you. Like maybe you feel it, maybe it causes you feelings on your side, but it doesn't really have to. Because if you just, detach yourself from it, or you, allow it to bring out things in yourself that you have to clear out, they have to be cleaned out, then it's a true blessing. And so when you take this sort of approach, and, we live in the age of victim consciousness, where everybody's a victim, everybody's offended and outraged and being put upon, and, they're all wanting to change everybody else but not themselves. In the truth community, there's no difference. Well, then you're just going to feel like crap for the rest of your life. I mean, that's, you're just going to be miserable the rest of your life, blaming other people and, blaming the system and whatever it is. But if you realize that you have internal work to do, a purification of the negative things and a working on developing positive character qualities and becoming a better person and connecting to God and bringing God into your life in a way that God can help you see things and guide you along the appropriate path. And, your soul as well. Because so many people are detached from their soul and their soul's purpose. And many of these things that you're experiencing that are negative in your life will help to bring those things out and help you develop these capabilities and help you, get back on your spiritual path and your spiritual goal, your true spiritual goal, and discover your true spiritual nature. Only spirituality can save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.